Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. Tonight I want to talk to you about depression and breathing. But before we get right into it, I want to bring a little bit of a background in regards to what we've been focusing on during the past many months, which has been mainly focusing on neuroscience of habit. And we've been using the understanding of neuroscience of habit in helping ourselves to deal with better understanding of what OCD is and the subsets of OCD and how to deal with them. And the important role neuroscience of habit plays in getting rid of OCD and subsets of OCD and manage it better by understanding its relationship with neuroplasticity and how it works and how they can help us to deal with one of the many things that we have to deal in our lives, having to do with a magnificent brain that we've been bestowed upon since 40,000 years ago, which is capable of helping us to reach the moon and also definitely capable of bearing us right 6 feet under if we don't know what its capabilities, limitations, function, and malfunction is all about. You know, you take your brain for granted thinking that, oh, it's a brain, it does math, it's where the wisdom is and it's intelligent. In fact, it's not. Brain is pretty stupid. It's just a mechanical machine. It's a thought manufacturing machine. It has a mandate like any other part of your body. It's a tool. It's an apparatus. But you got to know its limitation to how it works instead of believing into it as if it's a deity. It has a mandate. It understands better than you do. It knows about you more than you know about yourself. That it's the brain and then you come secondary, rather than there is a me, there is a you first, and then the brain, kidney, and all the other things have been added to it to give us more features. So you have to understand that you need to understand the limitations of the brain rather than thinking that brain is your leader and you're supposed to follow it and whatever the hell it says or it conjures up, it's got any actuality. To the point that it makes people go through all kinds of OCDs and subsets and terrible things that you have to deal with, like pedophilia OCD or any other kind of a OCD. Brain manufactures the thoughts based on ability to make thoughts because it can't make it, so it makes it. We've talked about it in many other videos. But tonight I want to talk to you how important this business of a neuroscience of habit is in the abilities that we could have by understanding it to get out of depression, to get out of OCD, to get out of the pedophilia OCD, religious OCD, homosexual OCD, any other subset of OCD. Because if you understand the nature of neuroplasticity, it works the same way for everything. If you keep practicing something like playing piano, you become really good at it. Why? Because the neurons start building bridges to pass on the neurotransmitters between the two ends of the neurons that makes you really good at what it is that you're doing a lot of, playing tennis, playing piano, whatever it is that you become master at. Now, if you're involved in thinking in some negative stuff that is not of your interest, inclination, or activities, you become really good at that bad thing that you really don't like, because neuroplasticity works in every way. If you keep doing something, whether it's good or bad, you become really good at that. Good at doing a bad thing, good at doing a good thing. Depends what it is that you're practicing a lot of. So if there's a negative thought or intrusive thought or activities that you kind of give it a credibility and you follow it, you allow it to ruminate and you keep hunting it and discussing it and letting it linger in your brain, that creates that effect of neuroplasticity and makes you be really good at, digs deeper into that whatever it is, whether it's good for you or bad for you, whether it's negative or positive. But by lingering in there and allowing it to be practiced and be done a lot of, then neuroplasticity rewires your brain to become really good at it, and then it becomes a habit later on, which becomes very difficult to get rid of. That is neuroscience of habits. Neuroplasticity is a big part of that discussion. So for that, we try to understand, to become clear, to understand that the brain is not you. So whatever brain suggests or conjures up, it should not represent itself as if it has any merits or credibility for you to follow it or allow it to take roots and become really good at believing what the brain has conjured up to be anything about you. But because you don't understand that you're not the brain, most of us didn't before we paid attention to it. Most people think that they are the brain. When we do understand that we are not the brain and brain is not you, then you have a clear path in order to come to the freedom that you deserve to have, independence from the brain, and be the boss of the brain. So they did a study, and for that it's very easy to recognize that you're not the brain, that you're outside of the brain, or rather, the brain is just a tool and you're the boss of it, not part of it, or not the follower of it. And that is the misconception that you've been fed since childhood, that what brain conjures up is got credibility and you are what the brain says you are. Total nonsense. For that, there are many ways to recognize it, but one very simple and scientific way is the experience that I explained in one of the videos that we have, which I will try to maybe put the link up here. But there was an experiment that they did in a laboratory in regards to quantum physics. And they chose a electron gun and start shooting it to the surface of the wall in front of it. But it had to go through a steel plate with a slot, an opening, that these electrons had to go through that steel plate, through that opening. And then the images of where it hits would show in the back wall, behind the steel plate, as one line. So fair enough, as soon as they added another slot beside this one on the steel plate, then they expected to be two lines, but instead there were like many lines. And they wondered why this happened. This seemed to be like the experiment they had done in a different way, where it had created waves, and then the points of connection with the impressions they left on the back wall was so many. So in here, it was electrons, and it was through one slot, and it was one line behind. Then they added the second lot, and suddenly, instead of two lines, they had so many lines, and they wanted to know why. The scientists decided to take a peek and to find out what's going on when the electron gun is fired. And in order to do that, they put a measuring device to witness, observe what is happening close as the electron gun was in action and things were happening. Lo and behold, as soon as they actually put that observer, that measuring device, to witness what's happening, in other words, peeking the process as it was happening, the electrons changed behavior and just made two lines. No more lines as it was in the previous experiment, just two lines. One behind this slot, one behind the other one as the electrons had passed through. That brought it to the attention that in the quantum physics world, the behavior of the electrons changed when there was a witness. And that witness is not part of the process. That witness is outside and independent of this experiment. Electrons, wall, the steel plate, slots, everything. It had nothing to do with the measuring device. Measuring device was simply outside of the experiments and nothing to do with the experiments. But the mere fact that it was there as a witness, as an observer, because it made a change to the behavior of the electrons, meaning an observer, a witness, outside of a system, results in change of the behavior of that system. That's a simple deduction of a simple result of this experiment. So you can do the same thing very simply to see how you are totally outside and not included in the brain's function as far as being part of the brain, and to understand that you are separate from the brain and you are not the brain. Brain is not you, a totally separate independent system. There is a you, There's the brain. You're not the brain, and brain is not you. And for that, we do the same exercise experiment that they did in the laboratory in the quantum physics experiment that I just mentioned. So what you do right now is simply just try to look for a thought. Become the observer, a witness of to see what thought is in the brain. However you imagine your brain is, whether you think of it as compartments, whether you think of it as neurons, whether you think of it as rooms, whether you think of it a bunch of rocks, you gotta look under it for thoughts. Whatever you think your brain looks like in there, where it makes thoughts, just look in all those nooks and crannies, or however you imagine your brain is, look for thought. See if you can find a thought there. You can see while you're observing or looking downwardly and trying to look for thought, there are no thoughts being made. Yet 80, 90,000 thoughts a day is being manufactured, made by the brain all the time. Yet when you look to find one, while you're searching, and in your brain, you're just going through all the parts that you know your brain is made of, whatever you think of it, you'll find nothing's happening. Which means, again, you're that observer. By observing and witnessing what's happening in the brain, nothing's happening in the brain. Which means the brain changes its behavior when there's a witness. And you are that witness because you just tried. And the witness, just as in the experiment, the quantum physics lab, is outside of the brain, is not one with the brain, is separate from the brain. Which, again, we simply come to the deduction of result of you're not the brain, brain is not you, simply because you're outside of it, and you could see that your role is as a witness to what the brain does, not as what you are is what brain says, not as part of the brain. Brain is a faculty, brain is a tool, brain is a apparatus, is an equipment, belongs to you. Like many other things that you use to have your life go on, you're accomplishing things and using them to do things with. And brain is one of them. But somehow we've thought that it's more important than that, meaning it's you. Brain is not you. So now that we've noticed this, it is very important for you to know not to fall in the groove of the brain. Brain falls into many different grooves and stays in there, and if you allow it to stay in there, it creates that neuroplasticity, which it could be in a negative way, creates some kind of a condition or characteristics which you mistakenly would think it's you or it's how you should be. In fact, it's not. It's because of the continuous repetition, you've allowed it to be yourself to become really good at it through neuroplasticity, which is very important for you to get out of the groove that the brain often negatively starts it, and you should be wise to it and not allow it to keep you in there, which many of these things are negatively affecting our lives, such as depression. We talked about many other things that this allowing the wrong thing continue in our brain, the thought pattern causes us the griefs and the discomfort, such as OCDs and many subsets of OCDs. Now we want to talk about the importance of being able to disrupt that continuous negative belief in something or involvement in believing the brain and causing us the griefs and moving us toward a negative lifestyle, which for different people is different things, but nevertheless, it causes the neuroplasticity toward that what you're not interested. That is why it's so important to cut that connection and not allow neuroplasticity take place in some things that is negative to your lifestyle, well-being, and health. In this particular segment, which this prelude by itself was a segment, so we are going to talk about depression and breathing. And that's going to be in part 2, because I think this is long enough for now. I'll talk to you soon.